Hello, everybody, and welcome to What's the Story podcast. This is WTS 254. My name is Danny Murray.
No, I'm Graham Errigan.
I went for a very dramatic pause there, Graham. Did it come across dramatic?
You pointed at me. It did.
I did. How are you, my friend? Are you well this week?
A1. Feel good.
Lovely. I'm buzzing. I've got my notification that I'm getting my booster. So can't wait. You mentioned yours last week, so I just felt the need to
We recorded actually when the day I got mine.
Yeah, we did, exactly, yeah. And look, we made no secret of it. We are pro-vaccine on this podcast. So I will happily...
Why wouldn't you be?
I will happily tell people I have had my 2 AstraZeneca jabs during the summer, and I'll be getting a Moderna booster in a couple of days' time. And,
I didn't know Moderna were doing it. I thought it was just Pfizer. I got the Pfizer one.
No, I've heard that they're going to use Moderna for boosters for the next week and a bit, purely because they've a batch load of Moderna that are due to expire in January. So if they don't use them, they lose them. So hook it to my veins, I say.
There's a part of me that's like we're very privileged to have the booster when
big time.
Like when you read stories in Africa, Nigeria had to dispose of 1 million vaccines because they were out of date. Like this is why UNICEF did the thing of when you get your vaccine, contribute a $5.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, was it get a vax, donate or some get a vax, buy a vax, something like that. I can't remember what the campaign was, but yeah.
People need to realize as well that until people in the third world are vaccinated, we're just going to be living with different variants all the time.
Well, this is it. Like, this is the thing that people seem to forget, is that the virus doesn't travel. People travel.
Yeah.
And so long as people are heading to far-flung places where vaccines aren't as prevalent, like you can't just look at Ireland and say 90% uptake when people are flying in and out of Ireland every other day, lads.
Yeah.
You know? Like there's thousands of people on airplanes, thousands of people on boats. So, of course, the virus is going to travel, and that's something we're all going to have to get used to. But the name of the game here is helping everyone, because if they lose, we lose. So, you know.
And that's not a conspiracy.
It's not a conspiracy. Kind of fitting we're having this conversation, isn't it? Considering our guest and our topic this week.
Who is our guest this week, Dan?
Our guest this week is Nicky Woolf, who is a journalist and the man behind like what is genuinely my favourite podcast of 2021, Finding Q, My Journey into QAnon. It is bonkers and brilliant and brave. I'm telling you, man, if my old English teacher Anthony Flynn is listening, he'd be just having a little nod, I think, right now, going, look at him and his alliteration, huh?
I think he still does listen, does he?
I hope so. When we were recording, there was a bit where you asked him a question, and I was dying to jump in with a Shakespeare quote, but the conversation moved on and I missed it. And I was going to do a shout out to Anthony Flynn at that point. If you are listening,
you spoke Latin though.
I did, yeah. That goes out to me college professor Therese Urbanchek. But yeah, if Mr. Flynn is still listening to us these days, I hope you're well, man, and I hope you're having I hope you have a great Christmas. But yeah,
we go straight to the interview, will we?
I think so, man. Yeah, there's no point in faffing about, because this is a good one. And genuinely, lads, right, if you know nothing about QAnon, rather you know somebody who's peddling QAnon nonsense, or rather you've just heard a few bits and bobs, you're like, what the fuck is this? Listen to this, but more important, genuinely, go to audible.com or download the Audible app. Sign up to the free trial. You don't even have to buy the subscription, and just listen to that podcast. Finding Q, My Journey into QAnon, by our guest this week, the wonderful Nicky Woolf. Nicky, first and foremost, man, congrats on that podcast. Fucking amazing
Thank
work.
you so much. That's very kind of you.
Right, look, let's just get into it.
Where do you start with a topic like that?
I know. How do you even begin with this show?
Right, for people who have kind of heard of QAnon but don't really know or anything like that, give us the kind of whistle-stop tour.
They're like potted. Okay, so QAnon is often referred to as conspiracy theory, whereas what it actually is a full-scale conspiracy religion that absorbs other conspiracy theories every time it touches them. It's all basically the infrastructure of it could only have been possible in the internet age. So it's the first sign of the kind of catastrophe that we can see in terms of our information ecosystem. ecostructure. I don't know if that's a word. Basically, what they believe is that there is a sinister cabal controlling the world. So far, so classic, conspiracy theory. They believe Donald Trump is secretly part of a mission to save the world from the deep state cabal, which is controlled by Hillary Clinton. And they believe the deep state cabal is all about child murder, child rape is essentially what they're like. And it's worth saying that kind of child murder thing none of this is new for conspiracy theories. It's a patchwork of older conspiracy theories that has been put together, and it caught fire under Trump because someone working for Trump, or people working for Trump, or people in the Trump ecosystem were throwing them these bones every so often. They'd give them a little hint. But mainly it's come from quote unquote the Q drops, which were a bunch of more than 2,000 messages posted to this anonymous message site. At first it was 4chan, and then it was a 4chan separation site called 8chan, which briefly, if listeners aren't familiar with it, these are anonymous message boards. And they posted all of these messages, and they're kind of cryptic. They're like HRC, extradition imminent, P145, watch the skies, or whatever, shit like that.
Yeah.
And people started following this, and now it's got to a situation where it's become a quasi-religion. People arrive in public spaces. People, famously, on January 6th, most of the crowd that stormed the Capitol, famously, the guy who was in all the pictures, the guy in the fur hat and the
QAnon shaman,
the QAnon shaman, yeah, who is as much of a victim as anyone else who's fallen into this cult, frankly. People who are framing him as a leader of the movement. He is not a leader of the movement. But yeah, it was this series of drops that no one knows who was posting them. We think we know who was posting them, but at the time they were anonymous drops, in theory coming from a government insider talking about overthrowing this conspiracy cabal. That's the core of it.
So, and the drops that you mentioned, and you kind of gave examples there, some of them are just they're kind of rambly with this weird kind of tone and this weird language. And is it fair? Because when I was listening to the podcast and kind of you have the little voiceover thing that reads out some of the Q drops and whatever, and in my head when I was listening to it, all I could think was this is kind of there's a bit of the kind of Nostradamus effect here, that people are interpreting this after the fact and going, that's what he meant. That's what it was.
Right. That's exactly what it is. And it is so easy for people to project backwards onto a, frankly, random series of words, and to be like, oh, this happened. This must have been what it, meant. And that's exactly what it is. They were vague enough that anyone could project anything onto it.
And a lot of, because as you said, QAnon has kind of it's encompassed lots of the conspiracy theories that are out there. The kind of things that 5 years ago you could talk about with a mate while having a pint and kind of laugh at it. At least some of the more innocent ones, but it's kind of took in, the 9/11 truthers. It's kind of took in, as you said, the whole stuff that has been debunked for years, like the Pizzagate thing, like you mentioned the pedophiles and whatever. And I was struck by kind of how easy it was to suck people in with the simple thing of well, you're against pedophiles, aren't you?
Yeah,
that's the thing. It frames the thing as, if you're not with us, you're with the pedophiles. And it's like, if you're against pedophilia, that's what we're doing. And it's like, well, you know, for someone who's, you know, like someone's mom who is maybe not that internet literate and doesn't know to apply a kind of a critical eye to these things, you see something like that and you're like, yeah, I'm against child abuse. This must be my people.
It's bizarre. Nicky, you know the way, you know that there was so many, the 2000 drops, the QAnon drops, like nobody on these message boards looked to verify this, to verify these remarks, the comments that.
Oh no, they did, but the verifications they were looking for had this, the kind of signal problem, which is if you're looking to verify someone being like, look to the Ides of March, that could mean anything, right? Some shit happens in March, you're like, oh, that confirms it. So they were finding things that confirmed their stuff in everything. Because if you're like, look, like, say, for example, and this isn't a direct example from one of the drops, but say, for example, you were to say, look to blue. That could mean literally anything, right? Someone comes out wearing a blue suit. Like, something is a code blue for like COVID stuff. It could be anything. And they found it very easy to find quote unquote confirmations for these things because that's how they were designed. They were designed to let people read into what they meant in that kind of way.
But even the users that were putting these that were putting these message drops down, like, could nobody verify who these users were? And like what I'm getting at is, could this be somebody just taking the piss and these people are actually believing it?
Well, this is the real question. And this is what we go into in the podcast is, in the ecosystem in which they first appeared, everyone's taking the piss. So they were on 4chan at first. The culture of a site like 4chan, which is based around the concept of anonymity, everyone is either a sucker or taking the piss. It's part of the concept of trolling comes out of these sites, and and trolling comes from trawling, like a fishing trawler, rather than trolls like under a bridge. You put out, you send out a thing and see who believes it. And so that's the culture from which it emerged. And then from there, we think, like our kind of thesis is that it came from this kind of general trolling. Someone's taking the piss. Maybe several people were taking the piss. Then it gets taken over by someone who we think saw a profit in it once it had started to get big. That's our kind of thesis of the case.
So with all of this, and kind of it's a decent segue here, I suppose, from that, because it sets us up nicely to talk about your journey then in the podcast. So you travel to America and you start to talk to some of the people who are QAnon believers, some of the people who have come out the other side, and some people who have lost friends and family members to this cult conspiracy. What is your kind of, and I'm conscious, I want people to listen to the podcast, so I'm kind of conscious of the questions I'm asking, not, going too far into it, but like, what is your overriding kind of, or the lasting legacy from meeting all these different kind of strands of people?
It's a tragedy, right? I mean, so for these people, and I think for the kind of jokers or whoever who started it for a laugh, and there were loads of those other kind of things being started for a laugh at the time. It was like, we can trick a few people, maybe we can trick the media into doing a thing about it. And then for the people who we think took it over, who were like, oh, we can use this to build our site, we can weaponize it for political. What none of them, think about is that this is tearing families apart. So we spoke to so many people who, say their dad or their mom or their aunt or their sister have become overwhelmed by this. This becomes the driving, ideology for their lives. And part of it is, and this is where it squares with a lot of kind of more classic cults. Part of it is, if people aren't with you, they're against you. You have to cut out the people in your life who aren't part of this situation, and they do. So we spoke to people who haven't spoken to their one of our main interviewees, this guy Luke, hasn't spoken to his dad in 5 years because he is so radicalized into this cult that there is no he thinks his sons are evil for not accepting this quote unquote truth into their life. That's how it grows from something that's a kind of an internet joke into something that does. And there's two kinds of damage it does, right? Like there's the January 6th riot, like damage to American democracy, and then there's the smaller human tragedies of the families this rips apart, because part of being a believer in this is everyone who's not a believer in it is by definition evil.
The thing that strikes me with it as well is it's always around the corner. Whatever prophecy, whatever the next kind of message is, or the next big thing that they're all buying into, it's always coming. It's always it never actually comes. It never arrives, but it's always coming. And no matter what happens, there's a justification for why it didn't happen this time. So like the fact that there's still people out there who believe somehow the election result, we're over a year since the election, we're coming up to, obviously in January will be a year since Biden is inaugurated, and yet there's still people who believe it's going to be overturned and that Trump is going to somehow or another ride off into Washington and take the throne in the White House.
Or, I mean, there's a large group of them who think that Biden is Trump after a face-off style.
Oh my god!
Modification. I know. They're like, I mean, this is the level of the brainworms, right? Like they are bending so far over backwards to not accept that they've lost that they will say, "We won. This is our guy wearing a different face."
My God.
That's where they. But actually, like, it's a playbook that's super classic for cults, right? Like you get all of these doomsday cults that you saw in the 80s and 90s and 2000s who will say doomsday is coming tomorrow, everyone give us all your money, and then wait out on the street for doomsday, and then it doesn't come, and then we're like, oh, we got this number wrong, it's actually next year, continue giving us all your money and it'll be right next time. And what's fascinating to me is that with those cults you usually get one charismatic leader who is known as the face of it. And he's the one saying, I know when doomsday is, you should give me all your money. Whereas what's interesting with QAnon is that it's organic, it's sort of built up. There haven't been any Q drops anymore. Whoever was behind it has basically stopped. And the belief continues, and that thing of, oh, it's going to be April 6th, it's going to be August 15th, it's going to be, that's happening without anyone, saying it from the top down. That's why I think it says something so interesting about how humans believe things, that operation can happen even without somebody planning it. It's like part of human nature to try and put a date on a belief.
And they stopped posting, but I mean, the pandemic probably came at a great time for these people, because then they had their own material and they didn't need to listen to a poster.
Yeah, and they stopped posting at the point at which it had reached a kind of critical mass. It was going on from the original poster of the drops. The poster of the drops, it's almost become like biblical verses. People will quote Q drops like chapter and verse.
Jesus.
But now it's, there are Q priests who will, there's battles between the people who claim to be able to properly identify the truth in these drafts. So it's gone from that kind of textual during the religion time to really what a religion looks like in its kind of second phase, when you have the text and the text is set, and now it's a fight between people who claim to be able to interpret the text.
So they're searching for their pope at this moment in time, essentially.
Exactly. Yeah. It's the Q Council of Nicaea. But genuinely, it's getting really vicious. Like in the podcast, we kind of hint at, because it was just starting, the question of who will be the first Pope of Q. But they really, it's been, plug this into my veins, but you've got Q activists and Q kind of influencers. There's like a whole universe of Q influencers, all of whom very recently have been absolutely ripping into each other for very small differences in interpretation of what, no, he meant, November 20th instead of November 19th, and they're just getting absolutely vicious with each other. And I'm like, this is fun.
It's like, where does it go from here in terms of, like, there are prominent people in American politics who they're either doing it with a bit of a wink and a nod to try and capitalize on the kind of like, I'm one of you, I want your votes, I'm one of you, or what would be worse again would be they genuinely believe.
This is the thing as well, Danny. Nicky. Just what Danny was saying there. It's an industry now. It's turning into an industry.
Right.
They're doing conventions as such, like you would with a evangelical pastor, and they're selling out areas and convention centers, and it's an industry now. And the believers don't realize that they're actually part of an industry where these people, like Danny said, just give a wink and a nod. They don't care if the truth, if people are telling lies. Their bank balance is just going up and up and up.
Right. And I think there's one key element to the question of where it goes from here, which is Trump running in 2024? If Trump is running in 2024, which I think is not out of the question, QAnon is going to play a massive part in this election. If he's not, then I think whoever else runs from the Republican Party is going to have to make a real effort to distance themselves from this cult which idolizes Trump. Otherwise, it's going to play a massive part in the election, and it's a complete unnut. Like it's a hand grenade in the middle of the system.
Do you think they'll want to, or will they be afraid of losing? Like Trump managed to pull in people who are completely disenfranchised, and when you see, like, even I'll never forget, like after the January 6th riots and the insurrection, and then you had Mitch McConnell, who in one breath kind of half denounced it, but then also kind of went and sided completely with Trump, as if like, oh, there's nothing to see here, everything's fine. Like, so when you've got like somebody who is part of the wallpaper of the GOP doing that, are the next wave going to be any better, or are they going to look at it and say, we need those votes?
I think, and this is like a whole nother. I think.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, sorry, we're taking a tangent here. Sorry, yeah.
Like once you bring Mitch McConnell in, I think there's two different kinds of evil in the Republican Party, and I think one is represented by Trump and one is represented by McConnell. And when Trump was in power, I mean, Trump is nature's perfect idiot, right? Like he allows anyone to project whatever they want onto him, and he doesn't give a shit. Like he'll be like, sure, QAnon, I'm not going to read about it. Can he even read? I don't know. McConnell is the cynical kind. Like he will see anything that leads to more winning and use it And I think if Trump is running and can activate this QAnon base, I think McConnell will use it however he can. If Trump isn't running, I don't think it activates the QAnon base, and that's a tool less than McConnell can use.
How does that, because, and to try bring it a little bit back in sync with kind of some of the ground covered in Finding Q, how does that potentially play out then for, say, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who was largely ridden into her kind of Congress position through, let's be honest, peddling this bullshit.
Right. Well, I mean, it's worth saying that Marjorie Taylor Greene, once she had the nomination for that seat, was going to win anyway. She did not need to use QAnon in order to win in that seat in Georgia. It's one of the safest seats in the country. She was doing this because she wanted to. I had this. I hope I'm not going to get in trouble for saying this. I had a massive fight with the lawyers in the podcast that I eventually lost, which was a fight over whether I could call Marjorie Taylor Greene, quote, a fascinatingly horrible person. She is just at every point, she will choose to do the worst thing. And she doesn't seem stupid. She's not a credulous believer. She has figured out that there is a cynical opening for the conspiracy QAnon kind of congresswoman. And she has decided that the way to get the most attention, the way to get the most power is by weaponizing that. And she, like, honestly, of all of the people that I covered throughout the entire thing, that I would say is just simply the worst human, it's Marjorie Taylor Greene. She is just awful.
What does it say for the, like, I know American politics is in the bin, like, but if she's advocating for the executing of prominent Democratic politicians,
of the President of the United States, let's not, she is doing things that in other eras would be counted as treason, right?
That's what I'm saying. How is she fitting the criteria to being able to run for election?
And that's when I think it comes back to the Mitch McConnell question, because I think the Republican Party will... There is no barrel they won't scrape if they think there's a winning angle to it.
Yeah. It's mad.
I'm fascinated.
It's mad, isn't it? It's completely...
batshit crazy, the whole thing.
Batshit crazy.
It's all unhinged, like, it's all bonkers. Even like, we know we have the QAnon stuff that now has evolved into the anti-vax and the it's we're all under an experiment.
It's a pandemic.
Pandemic.
Oh, God.
We're all under coercion, and when you listen to people, supporters of that, and they're asked to provide proof, there's no proof, which means there's no truth. But they're all so far into this rabbit hole that they can't get out. Like, when is it that a person? I'm just going on a tangent here, but when is it a person? Can a person come out the other side and say, Jesus, what was I thinking with thinking that the COVID was a pandemic and that the Clintons had
thinking the blood of young to stay healthy and all this mad crap.
That there's sex trafficking tunnels in Manhattan and everything. It's just bonkers.
The question of proof is where it kind of moves into more what we classically know about cults, which is that they have their own internal logic. The proofs are built into the questions. So they will say, Q predicted this. This is proof. And then this happened. And you're like, well, if you go back to the Q drop, it's incredibly vague. It's projecting back from something that happened onto the drop. But for someone who's already in that ecosystem, that's now what counts as proof. And that's a playbook that cults have been using from time immemorial. Like this is old school shit. But people will apply that same logic because they're in too deep. because the alternative that their entire worldview that they've spent now, this has been around since 2017. People have spent 4 years deep into this stuff. To come out of it, to admit they were wrong, would be unthinkable. And so everything must be proof, because they can't be wrong, can they? Like, they can't. It would bring down their whole worldview.
So is there no rehabilitating the followers?
There are people who professionally work on de-radicalizing cult members, and I kind of think the same approach that works on something like something like ISIS is the same here. If you've been radicalized into a cult and it's become your whole worldview, you need a really you need an approach to it that accepts that is. You can't just demonstrate that someone is wrong. That's not going to work. You can't give proof, because the concept of proof no longer means anything to them.
Yeah. I'll give you a laugh, Nicky. We're over in Ireland here. We have a phenomena which is called the Late Late Toy Show, and it happens once a year, about 4 weeks before Christmas. It's on 9 o'clock primetime television Friday evening, where the host just has loads of children come in and demonstrates toys, and there does be good stories, goodwill stories and stuff like that.
Oh, I can see what they'll have done with that.
The right is December 2020. There's people that I would know from social media that have followed all this QAnon. We're a part of the Nuremberg Code, the Great Replacement, all this.
Oh, yes. Which is pure white supremacist propaganda. Yeah. Like that is classic white supremacy there. And so that's not new. They've absorbed that, but that's, Stormfront. That's Nazis.
No, but the whole laugh here is that when this Late Late Toy Show aired last December 2020, there was a young kid who was demonstrating some farm animal cuddly toys or something of that like, and the presenter said, "Oh, this is great. What do you want to do when you grow up?" And she said, "I wouldn't mind being a veterinary nurse." And he's like, "Oh, that's so sweet. And what if you couldn't be a veterinary nurse?" And then, she suggested then that if I wasn't going to be a veterinary nurse, I could be a nurse that would then administer, would be able to help everybody with a vaccine. So all of a sudden, then the local
producers like ding 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 ding.
Then I had seen comments then suggesting that there was a logo on the Irish television's RTE Late Late Toy Show, that there was a logo, the FBI logo and the CIA logo, that were infiltrating their toy show to let a little girl propagate that she was promoting the vaccine. This is what these people like. This is just bonkers.
Hang on, this was supposed to be a laugh. This isn't. Oh god.
Yeah. But I think that raises a good question, and Nick, it'd be interesting to get your opinion on it. But like the QAnon thing, it's very American in terms of like the Q drops and the content in it. Now I know they're vague bullshit that anybody looking for something could find. As you said, watch for blue. It could be fucking Blue's Clues. It could be Chelsea. It could be fucking Anton. But like, how has it managed to kind of transition across the Atlantic into Great Britain, into the Republic of Ireland, and you now have people over here who are, where we go one, we go all. And like
and it's not just here. It's in the Philippines. It's in Brazil. It's in Germany. It's in Belgium. And like there was a Belgian attempted terrorist attack that was explicitly linked to, and that was recently. That was in the last couple of months, and I think the reason for it is, first of all, that the internet is international, right? There's no borders on the internet. Everyone is accessing the same, and especially in the Anglophone world, right? Like the English language internet is in the same way accessible to everyone, but also the ideas are so easily translatable that, for example, Brazil, all you need is someone to say, "Oh, I should translate this into Portuguese," and then it has exactly the same. It's fascinating having this in the midst of an actual viral pandemic, because it spreads kind of like a virus.
Yeah.
Once something is infected by it, it spreads it. You become a super spreader. and then it spreads into whatever community that's, you know, the way into of. So it can get it, like, nowhere is safe from this, and a lot of this is because that's also the places with high penetration of the big platforms. So Facebook, YouTube, these platforms have a huge part of this responsibility, because when people are creating QAnon content, the Facebook algorithm will promote it to people. And so people are seeing this in their feed, and the feed is designed for engagement, and there's no better kind of engagement than fear and rage, and this is exactly what this plays to, and that's universal, so it can get kind of anywhere. And the fears it plays to, the kind of fear of like, you know, child abuse is such a raw, such a the most evil thing that people can think of, that it's an easily translatable accusation for any market. Like, to put it in kind of bare terms, like, any market can make people afraid of satanic ritual child abuse, because that's the worst thing. You know, if you were having to think of the worst thing, the worst accusation to level at someone, like, that's basically it. Like, it's the nuclear option.
Well, we had that about 15 months ago, or perhaps maybe 18 months ago. A member of our parliament there was allegations, there was false claims about him, and about Peter Tatchell.
Oh yeah, that rings a bell. The MP for. Hang on. Okay, explain why I know that name. That name rings a bell.
I think Peter Tatchell was an advisor for the Labour Party. But basically, years and years ago, I think maybe to the early 2000s, there was an article where he was misquoted. But people over here, because Roderick O'Gorman is a TD, he's our actual current Minister for Children, and he is a gay man. And when he was elected, a couple of months after he was elected in 2020, the right wing over here organised demonstrations, and it was all what you were saying there, bringing up, you know, well, are you a supporter of child abuse? Well, if you're not, show up to this meeting. And they wanted the minister to resign because of his association with Peter Tatchell. He invited Peter Tatchell to our Pride parade around 4 or 5 years ago, but people were still associating him with the article before it was all debunked.
Right.
So, the context in which I bring that up is around the manipulation of, you know, people who are concerned about the pandemic, and people are, you know, oh geez, what are we going to do? They're kind of manipulating them into saying about child abuse, and then all of a sudden in Ireland we had a big demonstration outside our government buildings on that very topic.
Right. And here's the super uncomfortable part of covering this story, right? It's a conspiracy theory about a cabal of pedophiles at the top echelons of power, right? And at the same time, we have Jeffrey Epstein, we have I can't remember the BBC awful, the pedophile presenter Jimmy Savile. Like, this stuff does exist. Like, it's not there's not nothing there. It's not connected to a world order in the way that these conspiracy theories suggest, but it's a thing that exists, and it's a thing that, in the case of Jeffrey Epstein, interacts with, you know, does interact with the highest echelons of power. And that makes it super awkward, because you're sort of arguing this with the kind of believers, and they're like, well, what about Jeffrey Epstein? You kind of have to be like, yeah, sure, that did happen. Like, it's inescapable to to the story that it was real, and so it's based on that kernel of truth, which is, you know, a super awkward fact that we ran into a lot. That we were like, well, we can't. Some of this isn't something that you debunk. You just have to disconnect it from the concept of power, but also because we don't know exactly how connected Jeffrey Epstein was to circles of power. That's a very difficult thing to do, right? Like, it's not Trump being the savior, because Trump's got as many pictures with Jeffrey Epstein as Bill Clinton is. But we do have to be like, you know, there's not and all conspiracy theories are based on kernels of truth, and that's in some ways how they get you. But yeah, it's not like something like they were describing wasn't happening in some way. It's just the web of worldview that they then build around it.
Yeah, it's a bit mad. It's that, like, it's kind of laughing to myself here and going to nerd out, and you know, it's that Latin expression post hoc ergo propter hoc, isn't it? It's right, after this, therefore, because, like, it's
right.
You know, the two aren't exactly. Just because Jeffrey Epstein is, you know, a pedophile and was involved in all this kind of terrible stuff, it doesn't therefore mean anybody who has ever shook hands or been in a photo or spent an hour in the man's company is absolutely guilty of the same thing. Right. You know, but that's what the insinuation is.
And it's more than Jeffrey Epstein, right? Like, the thing these guys believe is that everyone is Jeffrey Epstein in the Democratic Party, and it becomes this thing. Whereas, you know, Jeffrey Epstein did not distinguish between political party affiliation, right? Like, but for the QAnon worldview, it's Democrats who are the pedophiles. It's in the UK. I guess in the UK it's kind of more complicated. But generally, it's the left that gets painted as this, because the people that this kind of conspiracy theory universally benefits is the ascendant right-wing kind of alt-right neo-Nazi phenomenon.
Yeah. That white supremacist vibe that we touched on earlier filters through into a lot of look, it's a fascinating one. And Nicky, I'm conscious that we've had you out in the cold now for quite some time in the middle of December.
Fine. This is fascinating.
So, you know, but it's look. But before we wrap up and we let you get inside to some warmth so that you don't perish in the cold on us, have you got anything else coming up? Any other projects you're working on at the moment that we can look forward to?
One or two. It's one of those where having investigated the end of the world in terms of the like info apocalypse, because I kind of think, like, if like QAnon represents how I think, like, if there's a reason that the human species is not going to make it, it's going to look like QAnon, right? Like, it's going to look like a complete apocalypse in terms of how we exchange information.
We're going to just dome ourselves into. Yeah.
I'm like, where do I go like, what's the, you know, what's the next thing? I don't know. What's the next apocalypse?
Yeah, it's I fear if the internet ever goes down somewhere in some corner of the world, these people will rise to power, and it will become the next religion. Like, it's just.
Oh no! You know what? The only way I think we can stop it is if the internet goes down. I'm begging for the internet. If the internet goes down tomorrow forever, we're saved.
Well, this podcast isn't, but other than that.
Wait, you guys are recording this on tape, right? Like, that's gonna.
Yeah.
There's some of our listeners that are going, "What the fuck is tape?"
Yeah, get it on vinyl. A time capsule.
Get it on vinyl. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And also, my podcast is also available on vinyl. You can. No, it's not. We should really do that. Audible doesn't do vinyl, but we should ask them.
Yeah, put the request in, get it selling. It's all Amazon.
Also, it'd be cooler, right? Like that'd be so dope if you just released a podcast on vinyl. That'd be awesome.
It would. It'd be brilliant.
There would be a hipster audience that just would
right?
absolutely lift you up shoulder high and parade you through whatever hipster coffee shop is playing it.
This record is brought to you by Squarespace.
Absolutely, Nicky. Look, man, thank you so much again for your time. It's been great talking to you. As I said, finding Q, my journey to QAnon is absolutely brilliant. Genuinely, just a fascinating and enthralling listen. Absolutely binged it when I listened to it.
Thank you. So I'm contractually obliged to say, sign up to Audible now for your 30-day free trial.
There you go, and lads, and do, because that's how you get to listen to it, and it's fucking mind blowing.
It's free with the free trial. You don't have to spend any other money on it.
Exactly. But yeah, Nicky, again, thanks so much, man.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been a pleasure.
I hope you get to go inside
Nicky.
into the warmth now, and have a great evening, man.
And get in touch if you're ever in Dublin.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
I'd love to. I didn't get a chance to, but like, shout out to my friend Aoife, who's in the podcast.
Yes, oh man, I actually meant to say to you.
Could not have done this without. She was our investigator, and she's amazing.
Aoife terrifies me because I get the feeling she uses my name and she would find out all of my deepest, darkest secrets.
So we did this thing where she was like, "Why don't I delve into you?" And I was like, "Oh, sure." And then she was like, "This is your dress. This is your." And I was like, "Oh, fuck." Yeah.
Yeah, she's a central part in the podcast, as you said. It's brilliant. But Nicky, yeah, listen, thanks again, man. Really appreciate your time. All the best.
Thank you. All right, take care.
How do people believe it, Mero?
I know.
Like, it's just like,
it's nuts. And like Nicky's podcast, the reason why we had him on, is a great audio presentation of the information, a lot more information than he gave us in the 40 minutes or so that we spoke to him. But there is also, we did actually, I don't know, I'm sure if we did reference it, we referenced it off air in our private conversation that on Channel 4 covered the documentary QAnon, the Cult of Conspiracy. And if anyone as well, after they listen to Nicky's podcast, get onto All 4 on Sky, and you'll see a visual presentation of these people and what they spout, the lies they spout, and it's just mad. It's mad. I just sometimes can't get my head around it. Like it's very complex. It's very. What are they thinking to believe this? Like, is it because they all have traumas? Is it because they all have, I'm not the most government. I don't like Fianna Fáil. I've never have. I don't like Fine Gael. I never have. Would say I'm anti-government, but.
Yeah, but you don't believe Micheál Martin is a lizard person who's part of a great superpower of.
That's the point I was trying to articulate. Exactly.
Yeah. It's like what I'd say is, like, look, the podcast, Nicky's podcast, it's just brilliant. It's only 9 episodes, but it's fucking brilliant because it lays out the entire story from the start of where this QAnon thing has come from, right the way through up until the last couple of months, and it does leave with a very strong picture of who was behind these Q drops and who Q is.
Yeah.
And
fascinating, isn't it?
I don't want to spoil that. I didn't want, because I mean, ultimately, Nicky wants people to listen to his podcast, and
listen to him.
Do. I'm putting him over in a big way because I mean this. I'm more than happy to put him over because I found myself. It was like a podcast equivalent of a series on Netflix, where the second one episode is over, I'm looking at the next episode and I'm like, 48 minutes. Yeah, go on, I'll get that in. I'll listen to that kind of thing. And he meets people who are high up in the Q thing, meets people who are completely anti-Q, but they've had friends and family members who have been absorbed into it. The first episode, he talks to a woman who was like she went viral over her Q beliefs, a mental video. She went viral with, and she's now come out of the whole Q thing, and he talks to her and just what happened, and it's just. And
I'll be honest, I haven't listened to it yet, but I am going to listen to it.
It is absolutely, it's brilliant. Look, it should be award-winning audio at its finest, I believe. But nonetheless, that's that. Mero, we are now what are we? We're by the time this goes out, we're 2 weeks from Christmas, which means we have 1, possibly 2 podcasts left.
Yes.
And then we're on our Christmas break, and me and you are off to, is it Switzerland we're going to this year on our retreat?
Oh, yeah.
On our What's the Story retreat.
Alps. To do a bit of toboggan, is that what it's called?
Yeah, a bit of tobogganing, yeah. We're going to do some nice saunas, I heard.
Outdoor jacuzzis.
That's what it was, yeah. I heard you would book the outdoor
Well,
jacuzzi.
it's done with natural bubbles with your wind.
Absolutely, I tell you what. 100% wind power this podcast is. But yeah, so lads, couple of weeks left. We don't often say it, but if you're listening on a platform that allows you to give a rating and review and whatnot, go on, give us an old wink and a nod there and tell us what you like. Give us a shout on social media. If you want to get us on the social medias, where can they get us, Miro?
They can get us on, we're on Twitter at WTS Pod. You can listen to us at WTSpod.com, or you can search WTS Pod on any podcast provider, such as Podcast Republic, Stitcher, Podbean, Apple Podcasts, anywhere, everywhere, Spotify, anywhere, everywhere you can get a podcast. He is at Danjo Murray on Twitter and Instagram. I'm at Merigamania on Twitter and Instagram. And until next time,
clear eyes,
full hearts,
can't lose,
too sweet.